The Mafia boss's jet made an emergency landing at her airfield. She needed the money desperately, so she took the job. But when his enemies found him, she realized fixing his plane was easy. Protecting her 7-year-old daughter from his world would cost everything. The jet screamed across the pre-dawn sky like a wounded bird. Inside the cockpit, Captain Morris gripped the controls with white knuckles, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air. "Mr. Rossi, we have a serious problem." Lorenzo Rossi didn't flinch. He sat in the leather seat, perfectly still, his dark eyes focused on the trembling wing visible through the window. At 32, he'd survived 3 assassination attempts, a federal investigation, and his father's brutal murder 6 months ago. A malfunctioning aircraft wasn't going to be what killed him. "How serious?" Lorenzo's voice was calm, measured. "The hydraulic stabilizer system is failing. We're losing control of the vertical stabilizer. If it goes completely." Morris didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "Options. There's a small airfield 20 miles northeast. It's rural, barely used, but the runway should handle us, if I can keep her steady." Lorenzo nodded once. "Do it." The next 15 minutes felt like 15 hours. The jet shuddered and bucked as Morris fought to keep it level. Lorenzo watched the landscape below transform from darkness to the soft gray of dawn. Farmland, trees, a narrow road cutting through the countryside like a scar. Then finally, a strip of cracked asphalt appeared between 2 fields. The landing was violent. The jet hit the runway hard, bounced once, twice, then scraped along the asphalt with a sound like tearing metal. Morris slammed the brakes. The aircraft skidded sideways, throwing Lorenzo against his seatbelt, before finally grinding to a halt 50 feet from a weathered hangar. Silence. Lorenzo unbuckled his seatbelt and stood. Through the window, he could see a single building, a combination office and garage with peeling paint and a hand-painted sign that read Miller's Aircraft Repair. A pickup truck sat in the gravel lot, rust eating at its wheel wells. "Stay with the plane," Lorenzo told Morris. "And call Marco. Tell him we're delayed but safe." "What about the jet?" "Let me worry about that." Lorenzo stepped out into the cool morning air. The smell of engine oil and cut grass hit him immediately. This place was the middle of nowhere. Exactly where he didn't want to be. Not with the Silva family breathing down his neck and a peace summit scheduled in Miami in 4 days. The hangar door rolled open with a metallic groan. A woman emerged, wiping her hands on a rag tucked into her belt. She wore grease-stained coveralls, work boots, and had her dark blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. No makeup. No nonsense in her expression. She looked like someone who'd been awake for hours, not someone startled by an emergency landing at dawn. "You know," she called out, walking toward the jet, "most people call ahead before they tear up my runway." Lorenzo almost smiled. Almost. It wasn't planned. "I can see that." She stopped a few feet away, hands on her hips, studying the aircraft with a professional eye that immediately told Lorenzo she knew what she was looking at. "That's a Gulfstream G650. Custom modifications. You've got a hydraulic leak, I can see it from here. And based on those scorch marks near the tail assembly, I'm guessing your stabilizer system had a catastrophic failure mid-flight." Lorenzo raised an eyebrow. "You know your aircraft." "I'd better. I'm the only mechanic within 60 miles who can work on something like this." She walked closer to the jet, crouching to examine the landing gear. "You're lucky you didn't flip on landing. That stabilizer is held together by prayers and spite right now. Can you fix it?" She stood, meeting his eyes directly. Hers were green, sharp, and didn't show a trace of intimidation despite the fact that Lorenzo knew exactly what kind of presence he carried. Expensive suit, cold expression, the unmistakable air of someone used to giving orders and having them followed. "I can fix anything that flies," she said. "Question is whether you can afford me. Money isn't an issue. It never is for people who land in jets like that." She pulled a small flashlight from her pocket and clicked it on. "But this isn't about money. Parts for a G650 aren't sitting in my garage. I'll need to source them, and that takes time." Could be 3 days. Could be 5 inch. 3 days. Lorenzo had 4 before the summit. The Silva family would already know his plane went down. They had eyes everywhere. Staying in one place this long was dangerous. But flying in a damaged aircraft was suicide. "What's your name?" Lorenzo asked. "Jenna Miller. I own this airfield." She gestured toward the small building. "Been running it for 4 years. Before that, I worked on military aircraft at Nellis Air Force Base." Jenna Lorenzo extended his hand. "Lorenzo Rossi." She hesitated for just a fraction of a second. A flicker of recognition in her eyes that told Lorenzo she'd heard his name before. Not surprising. The Rossi family wasn't exactly unknown. But she shook his hand anyway, her grip firm and calloused. 3 days, she said. "I'll have your jet flying again. But I need 50% up front, and you keep your people out of my way while I work." "Agreed. And one more thing." Jenna's expression hardened. "I have a daughter. She's 7. She lives with me in the house at the edge of the property. Whatever business brought you here, whatever trouble might be following you, it stays away from her. Are we clear?" Lorenzo held her gaze. In that moment he saw something he recognized. A mother's fierce protectiveness, the same look his own mother had worn when his father's enemies had threatened their family years ago. "Crystal clear," he said quietly. "You have my word." Jenna nodded, though her expression suggested she wasn't sure how much a man like Lorenzo Rossi's word was worth. "Good. Then let's get your jet into the hangar before the whole county shows up to see what crashed." As she walked back toward the building, Lorenzo pulled out his phone. No signal, of course not. This place was so remote it probably didn't even show up on most maps. Which meant Marco couldn't reach him, but more importantly, it meant the Silva family would have a harder time tracking him down. Maybe Lorenzo thought this forced landing wasn't the disaster it seemed. Maybe it was an opportunity. But as he watched Jenna Miller disappear into the hangar, already barking orders to someone inside, Lorenzo couldn't shake the feeling that he just stepped into something far more complicated than a simple aircraft repair. Something that might change everything. Lorenzo stood at the edge of the airfield, coffee in hand, watching the road that led into town. He'd been standing there for 20 minutes, perfectly still, his eyes tracking every vehicle that passed. 3 cars in the last hour. 2 pickups and a sedan. The sedan had slowed down. Just for a moment, barely noticeable to anyone who wasn't trained to notice such things. But Lorenzo had spent his entire life learning to read threats, to see danger before it arrived. The sedan's driver had turned his head toward the airfield, studying the Gulf Stream now partially hidden inside the hangar. Then the car had sped up and disappeared around the bend. "Problem." Lorenzo turned. Jenna stood behind him, a wrench in one hand and a sandwich in the other. Her coveralls were now streaked with fresh hydraulic fluid, and there was a smudge of grease on her cheek. "Maybe," Lorenzo said. "You get many visitors out here." "Hardly any. That's why I can afford to keep the place." She took a bite of her sandwich. "Why?" "A car slowed down about 10 minutes ago. Driver was watching the hangar." Jenna frowned. Could be curiosity. Small town news travels fast. Someone probably heard about the emergency landing and wanted to see what happened. Probably Lorenzo didn't believe that for a second. The Silva family was efficient. They would have learned about his plane's mechanical failure within hours of the emergency call. They'd know he'd landed somewhere in this region, and they'd be sending people to search every small airfield within range. The question was, how much time did he have before they found him? "How's the repair coming?" Lorenzo asked. "Slower than I'd like." Jenna wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "The stabilizer damage is worse than I thought. The hydraulic lines are completely fried, and there's structural damage to the mounting assembly. I can fix it, but I need parts. I've got calls out to 3 suppliers. Should hear back by this afternoon." "What if I told you we might not have that much time?" Jenna's eyes narrowed. "What kind of trouble are you in, Mr. Rossi?" Lorenzo considered his options. He could lie. Tell her it was nothing, keep her in the dark, maintain the professional distance between client and mechanic. But lies had a way of becoming dangerous when threats were real. And this threat was very real. The kind that means people might come looking for me, Lorenzo said carefully. The kind where those people won't be polite about it. I knew it, Jenna's jaw tightened. I knew the second you stepped off that jet that you were bad news. What did you do? Steal something? Owe someone money? It's more complicated than that. It always is. She threw the remains of her sandwich into a nearby trash bin. Look, I don't care what you did or who you pissed off. But I told you, my daughter doesn't get dragged into your mess. If dangerous people are coming here, you need to leave. Now. I can't. Not without the jet. Then you should have thought about that before you. Jenna stopped mid-sentence, her eyes focusing on something behind Lorenzo. He turned. Another sedan. Black. Tinted windows. It had pulled onto the access road leading directly to the airfield, moving slowly, deliberately. Lorenzo's hand moved instinctively toward his hip, where his weapon was concealed beneath his jacket. That's not curiosity. The sedan stopped about 100 yards away. The engine idled. No one got out. They were watching. Confirming. Get inside, Lorenzo said quietly. This is my property. Jenna, please. Something in his tone made her listen. She backed toward the hangar, her eyes never leaving the sedan. Lorenzo stayed where he was visible, making himself the clear target. The sedan's passenger window rolled down slowly. A man leaned out, mid-30s, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. He held up a phone, taking a photo of Lorenzo, the hangar, the entire airfield. Then the window rolled back up. The sedan reversed, turned around, and drove away. Lorenzo's mind worked quickly. They'd found him. They'd confirmed his location. Now they'd report back to whoever sent them, and a decision would be made. Attack immediately, or wait for the right moment. Knowing the Silva family, they'd wait. They'd study the location, plan their approach, minimize the risk of witnesses. Probably tonight after dark, when the rural area was empty and quiet. Which meant Lorenzo had maybe 12 hours. Who were they? Jenna demanded, emerging from the hangar. Scouts, Lorenzo said. They'll be back. With more people. Yes. Jenna's face went pale. My daughter. She comes home from school at 3 o'clock. She takes the bus. It drops her off right at the road entrance. Lorenzo checked his watch. 11:47 a.m. 3 hours and 13 minutes. Does she have a phone? She's 7, no. Then we call the school. We arrange for someone you trust to pick her up and keep her away from here until this is resolved. Resolved how? Jenna's voice rose. You're talking about people coming here to hurt you, and you want me to just what? Hide my daughter and pretend everything's fine. No, Lorenzo met her eyes. I want you to protect your daughter while I handle this. Handle it how? Lorenzo's expression was cold now, the calm mask he wore when making decisions that men like him had to make. By making sure they regret finding me. Jenna stared at him and Lorenzo could see her mind working. Weighing options, calculating risks, trying to decide if the man standing in front of her was someone she could trust or someone who would get her and her daughter killed. Finally she spoke. There's a woman in town. Sarachan. She watches Lily sometimes when I have to work late. I'll call her, have her pick Lily up from school and keep her overnight. Good. But after this, after whatever happens tonight, you leave. The second your jet is fixed, you're gone. Agreed. Jenna pulled out her phone and walked toward the office, already dialing. Lorenzo turned back toward the road, his jaw set. The Silva family had found him. Now he'd show them exactly what happened when they made that mistake. The bank manager's office smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. Jenna sat across from Richard Pembroke, a man whose sympathetic smile had worn thin over the past 6 months. He slid a document across the desk. Another past due notice, another reminder that she was drowning. Mrs. Miller, I've extended every courtesy I can, Pembroke said, his fingers drumming on the mahogany desk. But the board is losing patience. Your loan is 4 months overdue. We need to see significant payment, or we'll have no choice but to begin foreclosure proceedings. Jenna's stomach twisted. I've been making partial payments. Partial payments don't cover the interest, much less the principal. He pulled out a calculator, turning it toward her. You currently owe $87,000. Medical debt from your late husband's treatment, the mortgage on your property, equipment loans. It's all bundled together. Without a substantial payment in the next 30 days, the bank will seize the airfield. 30 days. Jenna thought about Lily, her daughter's laugh, her bright eyes, the way she still asked when Daddy was coming home even though it had been 18 months. The airfield wasn't just a business. It was the home where Lily had taken her first steps. It was the garage where her husband had taught her how to rebuild a carburetor on a lazy Sunday afternoon. It was all they had left. What if I told you I have a client? Jenna said. A significant repair job. High-end aircraft. The payment would be substantial. Pembroke's eyebrows rose. How substantial? Enough to cover at least half of what I owe. It was a gamble. Lorenzo Rossi hadn't discussed exact numbers, but a man who flew in a custom Gulfstream G650 wouldn't blink at a $50,000 repair bill. Maybe more. Pembroke leaned back in his chair, studying her. Mrs. Miller, I want to believe you, but I've heard promises before. Do you have a signed contract? A deposit? Not yet. But. Then I can't help you, he stood, signaling the meeting was over. 30 days. Bring me a certified check for at least $40,000, or the foreclosure process begins. I'm sorry. Jenna drove back to the airfield in silence, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles turned white. $40,000. She'd need to charge Lorenzo at least $60,000 to cover parts, labor, and make the payment with enough left over to survive the next few months. It was aggressive pricing, the kind that could scare off a client. But what choice did she have? When she pulled into the airfield, she found Lorenzo standing outside the hangar, phone pressed to his ear. He was speaking Italian, his voice low and sharp. He sounded like a man giving orders, not asking for favors. He hung up as she approached. Parts suppliers? Lorenzo asked. Bank, Jenna said flatly. Turns out fixing your jet might be the only thing standing between me and losing everything. Lorenzo's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Understanding maybe, or calculation. How much do you need? For the repair? 60,000, and she waited for him to flinch, to negotiate, to tell her she was out of her mind. Instead, Lorenzo pulled out his phone. Give me your bank account information. What? Your bank account. I'll wire you half now, half when the repair is complete. Jenna blinked. You're not going to negotiate. You said you're the only mechanic within 60 miles who can fix my jet. That means you set the price. Lorenzo's eyes were steady, serious. Besides, I don't negotiate with people who tell me the truth. Something loosened in Jenna's chest. Not trust, not yet, but something close to it. She pulled out her phone and read him the account details. Lorenzo typed quickly, hit send, and pocketed his phone. Done. You'll see it in your account within the hour. $30,000. Just like that. Jenna felt lightheaded. Why? Why what? Why not negotiate? Why not question me? You don't know me. I could be overcharging you by $20,000 for all you know. Lorenzo tilted his head slightly. Are you? No. But you don't know that. Actually, I do. Lorenzo gestured toward the hangar. You've been working on my jet for 3 hours straight. You haven't taken a real break. You called 4 different suppliers and argued about delivery times like your life depended on it. And you're wearing the same coveralls you've probably worn for the past 2 days, because you don't waste time on appearances when there's work to be done. He paused. You're not the type to cheat someone, Mrs. Miller. You're the type who doesn't know how to quit, even when you should. Jenna felt heat rise to her cheeks. Not embarrassment, but something else. Recognition, maybe. The strange feeling of being seen by someone who had no reason to notice. "Come inside," she said, changing the subject. "I need to show you something." She led him into the small office attached to the hangar. It was cramped, cluttered with invoices and repair manuals. On the wall hung a collection of photos, Jenna in Air Force dress blues, Jenna standing beside military aircraft, Jenna receiving a commendation. And in the center, a larger photo in a simple frame. A man in his early 30s, dark hair, warm smile, standing beside a small Cessna with his arm around a younger Jenna. They both looked happy, sunburned, like they'd just spent the afternoon flying. Lorenzo stopped walking. He stared at the photo, his face draining of color. "Your husband," Lorenzo said quietly. It wasn't a question. "David Miller," Jenna confirmed. "He died 18 months ago. Pancreatic cancer." Lorenzo stepped closer to the photo, his hand trembling slightly, the first time Jenna had seen him show any real emotion. "David Miller," Lorenzo repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "He went by David, not his birth name." No, Jenna frowned. "He changed it legally when he was 25. Before I met him. He never talked much about his life before that. Said he'd left something behind. Something he needed to stay away from." Lorenzo reached out and touched the frame gently, like it might shatter. "I knew him," Lorenzo said. "Before he was David Miller. Before he left." Jenna's heart skipped. "What?" Lorenzo turned to face her, and for the first time since he'd stepped off that jet, she saw something raw in his expression. Pain. "His real name was Dante Russo," Lorenzo said. "And he was my best friend." The silence in the office stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Jenna stared at Lorenzo, her mind racing to connect pieces that didn't seem to fit. David, her David, the man who taught her daughter to ride a bike, who made terrible pancakes every Sunday morning, who died holding her hand, had been someone else entirely before she met him. "Dante Russo," she repeated slowly. "That's not possible. David never mentioned anyone named Lorenzo. He never talked about his past at all." He wouldn't have Lorenzo's eyes remain fixed on the photograph. Leaving meant cutting every connection. That was the only way to stay safe. Safe from what? Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "From the life he was born into. The same life I'm still in." The pieces clicked into place. Jenna felt her stomach drop. "You're telling me David was part of the Russo family?" "Yes. A cousin branch, but blood nonetheless." Lorenzo finally looked away from the photo. "We grew up together. Learned together. He was supposed to stand beside me when I took over my father's territory. But he left. He ran." Lorenzo's voice wasn't accusatory, just factual. 20 years ago. He was 23. He disappeared in the middle of the night, didn't tell anyone where he was going. My father wanted to hunt him down, make an example of him. I convinced him to let Dante go." Jenna's hands were shaking. She sat down hard in her desk chair. "Why didn't you go after him?" "Because he was my brother in every way that mattered." Lorenzo's expression softened with old grief. "And because he wanted out. Dante never had the stomach for our world. He hated the violence, the compromises, the constant looking over your shoulder. He wanted something clean. Something real. So he became David Miller and built a life fixing airplanes in the middle of nowhere." Jenna's voice cracked. "He found peace. Did he?" Lorenzo asked quietly. "Or did he spend every day afraid his past would find him?" The question hit like a physical blow. Jenna remembered the way David used to check the locks 3 times before bed. The way he'd tense whenever a black SUV drove past their property. The way he'd made her promise, made her swear, that if anything ever happened to him, she'd protect Lily above everything else. "He died afraid," Jenna whispered. "Even at the end, when he was so weak he could barely speak, he kept asking if we were safe, if anyone had come around asking questions. I thought he was delirious from the pain medication. He wasn't. Lorenzo moved to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. He knew that men like us, men from families like ours, we don't get clean endings. We don't get peace. The past always finds us eventually. Except it didn't find him. He died from cancer, not violence. That's the only mercy he got. Jenna stood abruptly, anger flaring. Don't you dare. Don't you dare turn his death into some tragic inevitability. David built a good life. He was a good father. He loved us and we loved him. That meant something. I know it did. Lorenzo turned back to face her, and there was something fierce in his expression now. That's why I'm telling you this. Dante, David, he was the best of us. He saw what we were becoming and had the courage to walk away. He found you, built a family, gave his daughter the kind of life he never had. His voice dropped lower. And I'll be damned if I let anyone destroy what he died protecting. The words hung in the air between them. The people who are coming tonight, Jenna said slowly. The Silva family. Would they hurt Lily? Would they hurt me? To get to me? Without hesitation, Lorenzo's honesty was brutal but necessary. That's why your daughter needs to stay away. That's why after tonight, I need you to forget I was ever here. How am I supposed to forget? You just told me my husband had an entire life I knew nothing about. You're telling me the man I married was running from the same world you're still part of. The difference is David got out. Lorenzo's voice was firm. You and Lily, you're his legacy. The proof that someone from my world can actually build something worth protecting. I won't let that be taken away. Jenna wanted to scream at him, to throw him out, to go back to this morning when the biggest problem in her life was bank payments and broken hydraulic systems. But she couldn't, because Lorenzo Rossi was standing in her office, looking at her dead husband's photo like he was staring at a ghost, and somehow that connection, that shared loss, made everything more complicated. Sarah has Lily, Jenna said finally. She'll keep her overnight. She lives 15 miles outside town, different direction. No one would connect her to us. Good. So what happens now? Lorenzo checked his watch. Now we wait. The scouts will report back. Their people will come after dark, probably around midnight, when the area is quietest. They'll expect to find me alone or with minimal security. You have security. I made a call earlier. 2 of my men are driving up from Denver. They'll be here by 9 o'clock. Lorenzo's expression hardened into something cold and calculating. The Silva family thinks they've cornered me in the middle of nowhere, isolated and vulnerable. Haven't they? No. Lorenzo's smile was sharp, dangerous. They've walked into a trap. They just don't know it yet. Jenna felt a chill run down her spine. This was the other side of Lorenzo Rossi. Not the man who'd looked at her husband's photo with grief, but the Mafia heir who'd survived in a world built on violence and strategy. I should be scared of you, Jenna said. You probably should be. But I'm not. She surprised herself with the truth. Because David trusted you enough to make you let him go. And because you're the only person standing between my daughter and people who would hurt her without thinking twice. Lorenzo nodded slowly. I won't let anything happen to her. You have my word. Not as Lorenzo Rossi, but as the man who loved Dante Russo like a brother. Outside, the sun finally disappeared below the horizon. The darkness was coming. And with it, the Silva family's mistake. Midnight came and went without incident. Lorenzo stood in the shadows of the hangar, watching the access road through night vision binoculars. His 2 men, Marco and Vincent, had arrived at 9:15, armed and positioned at strategic points around the property. Marco, his lieutenant, was a broad-shouldered man in his 40s with cold eyes and steady hands. Vincent was younger, quicker, a former Marine who'd found new purpose in the Rossi organization. But the Silva family hadn't come. Not at midnight. Not at 1 a.m. Not at 2. They're smarter than I thought, Marco said, appearing beside Lorenzo. They know we'd expect a night attack. Or they're waiting for something else, Lorenzo replied, lowering the binoculars. Like what? Daylight. Witnesses. A crowded place where we can't respond without causing a scene. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. They're going to make it public. That's not their style. It is if they want to send a message. At 6:47 a.m., as the first light of dawn broke across the horizon, Lorenzo's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We know where the woman's daughter goes to school. We know what time she arrives. Make this easy, Rossi. Walk away from the airfield alone, or the girl becomes collateral. Lorenzo's blood turned to ice. He immediately called Sarah Chen's number, the woman watching Lily. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. He tried again. Nothing. Marco, get the car. Now. Jenna had fallen asleep in the office chair around 3 a.m., exhausted from stress and fear. Lorenzo shook her awake gently. We have a problem. She jolted upright, instantly alert. What? What happened? The Silva family knows about Lily. They know she's not here. And I can't reach Sarah. The color drained from Jenna's face. No. No, you said she'd be safe. She should be. But we need to check. Where does Sarah live? 15 miles east. Pine Ridge Road, the blue house at the end. Jenna was already grabbing her keys, her hands shaking. If they touched her, if they hurt my baby. They haven't. Not yet. Lorenzo's voice was firm, grounding. This is intimidation. They want me panicked and making mistakes. They piled into Marco's SUV, Lorenzo in front, Jenna and Vincent in back. Marco drove fast, the vehicle eating up the rural highway as the sun rose behind them. Jenna's phone rang. Sarah's number. She answered on speaker. Sarah? Is Lily okay? She's fine. Sarah's voice was steady but strained. She's still asleep. But Jenna, there's a car parked across the street. It's been there since 5 a.m. 2 men inside. They haven't moved, haven't done anything. But they're watching the house. Lock all the doors, Lorenzo said, leaning toward the phone. Don't let Lily near any windows. We're 10 minutes away. Who are you? A friend. Stay calm. Stay inside. They made it in 8 minutes. Marco slowed as they approached Sarah's street. Sure enough, a black sedan sat across from the blue house, conspicuous in the quiet neighborhood. 2 figures visible through the windshield. Drive past, Lorenzo instructed. Don't stop. Circle around to the back road. But as they passed, one of the men in the sedan raised a phone. He was calling someone. They've seen us, Vincent said. It's a setup, Marco growled. They wanted us to come here. Lorenzo's mind raced. The Silva family wasn't trying to kidnap Lily. They were trying to draw him into the open, away from the defensible airfield, into a residential area where his options were limited. Turn around, Lorenzo ordered. Get back to. The explosion cut him off. A massive boom echoed from the direction they'd just come, from the direction of the airfield. A plume of black smoke rose into the early morning sky, visible even from miles away. Jenna screamed. My hangar. That's my property. It's a distraction, Lorenzo said, but his voice was tight. They're splitting our attention. Marco's phone rang. He answered, listened for 3 seconds, then his face went dark. The jet. They planted explosives. The Gulf Stream is gone. Another car appeared suddenly. A white van speeding toward them from the opposite direction. It swerved into their lane, forcing Marco to slam the brakes. The van's side door flew open. A man with a rifle leaned out. Down! Vincent shouted. Bullets tore through the SUV's windshield. Marco ducked, jerking the wheel hard right. The vehicle jumped the curb, plowed through a mailbox and crashed into a telephone pole. Jenna's head snapped forward, hitting the back of Lorenzo's seat. Pain exploded through her temple. Through blurred vision, she saw Vincent kick open his door and return fire, his pistol barking 3 times. The rifleman in the van jerked backward, hit. But more men were emerging from the sedan behind them, 3 figures all armed. Out! Everyone out! Lorenzo pulled Jenna from the vehicle, shielding her body with his own as bullets pinged off metal. Marco was bleeding from a cut on his forehead but still moving, still fighting. They ran. Not toward Sarah's house. That would bring danger to Lily. Instead, Lorenzo pulled Jenna toward the treeline bordering the neighborhood, into the thick Colorado forest where vehicles couldn't follow. Behind them, gunfire continued. Vincent's voice shouted something in Italian. Marco returned fire in controlled bursts. Jenna stumbled, her legs weak with terror. Lorenzo caught her, his arm around her waist, practically carrying her into the trees. "Keep moving," he urged. "Don't stop. My daughter is safer if we're not near her. Trust me." They crashed through undergrowth, branches tearing at their clothes. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit, voices shouting, footsteps crunching through dead leaves. Lorenzo pulled them behind a massive fallen log, both of them gasping for breath. Jenna's whole body shook. "They blew up my hangar. They blew up your jet. This is insane. This is war," Lorenzo said grimly, checking his pistol. 6 rounds left. And they just made it personal. A twig snapped 20 yards away. Someone was coming. Lorenzo raised his weapon, his finger on the trigger. And Jenna realized with absolute certainty that her life would never be the same again. The forest was eerily silent except for the sound of their breathing. Lorenzo's hand shot out, pressing Jenna flat against the log. Through the gaps in the bark, she could see a figure moving through the trees, a man in tactical gear, sweeping his rifle in wide arcs, searching. He was alone, separated from his group. A mistake. Lorenzo moved with terrifying speed. He left Jenna behind the log and circled wide, staying low, using the terrain like he'd done this 1,000 times before. 30 seconds later, there was a brief struggle, a muffled grunt, the sound of something heavy hitting the ground. Then silence. Lorenzo reappeared, dragging the unconscious man by his tactical vest. He zip-tied the man's hands behind his back with practiced efficiency and pulled a phone from the man's pocket. "What are you doing?" Jenna whispered. Getting answers. Lorenzo unlocked the phone. No password, another mistake, and scrolled through recent messages. His expression darkened. "They're not Silva family." "What?" "These are mercenaries. Hired guns." He showed her the phone. A group chat filled with tactical coordinates, payment confirmations, target photos. Lorenzo's face was in half of them. "The Silva family hired outside contractors to take me out. They're staying clean, keeping their hands off the trigger. Does that matter? They still tried to kill us. It matters because mercenaries fight for money, not loyalty." Lorenzo pocketed the phone. "Which means they can be reasoned with, or eliminated without starting a full gang war." In the distance, voices called out, the other mercenaries searching for their missing teammate. "We need to move," Lorenzo said. "There's a town half a mile east. We find a phone, call Marco, regroup." They moved through the forest, keeping low and quiet. Jenna's mind was still reeling. Her hangar was destroyed. Her livelihood, her home, everything she'd fought to keep after David died, was gone. And somewhere in a house behind them, Lily was waking up, probably asking for breakfast, completely unaware that armed men were hunting her mother. They reached the edge of town, a small main street with a diner, a hardware store, and a gas station. Normal people doing normal things. A woman walking her dog. A teenager on a skateboard. Jenna had never felt more separated from normal in her entire life. Lorenzo led her to the diner, a retro place called Millie's with red vinyl booths and checkered floors. Inside, the smell of coffee and bacon was almost painfully ordinary. He chose a booth in the back corner, positioning himself with a clear view of the entrance. A waitress appeared. An older woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read Dorothy. "You two look like you've had a rough morning," she said, concerned. Lorenzo managed a tired smile. "Car trouble. We hiked in from the highway." "Well, coffee's fresh. I'll get you both a cup while you look at the menu." The moment she left, Lorenzo pulled out the stolen phone and made a call. Marco answered on the first ring. Boss, where are you? Millie's Diner on Main Street. Status. Vincent took 2 rounds in the vest. Bruised ribs, but he'll live. The mercs pulled back after you disappeared into the woods. I think they lost your trail. Marco's voice was tight. The airfield's a mess. Fire department's there now. The jet's totaled. And the Silva family's going to know they missed you. Good. Let them think I'm running scared. Lorenzo's eyes were calculating now. The panic from the forest replaced with cold strategy. Marco, I need you to make some calls. Contact Tommy Brescia in Chicago. He owes me a favor. Tell him I need a complete workup on the Silva family's hired mercenaries. Names, contracts, payment routes. Everything. What are you planning? To cut the head off the snake without touching the snake. Lorenzo glanced at Jenna, who was staring at him with a mixture of fear and fascination. And Marco? Send someone to watch Sarah Chin's house. Discreetly. If anyone gets within 100 yards of that little girl, I want to know immediately. Already done. Vincent's brother is sitting 2 houses down with a clear line of sight. Good man. Lorenzo hung up and turned to Jenna. Lily's protected. 4 of my people are within response distance of that house. No one's getting near her. For how long? Jenna's voice was hollow. How long can you keep this up? They destroyed everything I have, Lorenzo. My business, my home. What am I supposed to do now? You rebuild. With what money? What property? She laughed bitterly. The insurance won't cover acts of terrorism, and even if they did, it would take months to process. I'm finished. Lorenzo reached across the table and took her hand. The gesture was so unexpected that Jenna froze. David left you because he wanted you to have a life, Lorenzo said quietly. A real life away from all of this. I'm not going to let his sacrifice be for nothing. You can't fix this. Watch me. Lorenzo's grip tightened slightly, not threatening but firm. Certain. The Silva family wanted to hurt me by destroying what you've built. They thought they could scare me into submission by threatening an innocent woman and her child. They thought wrong. Dorothy returned with coffee. Lorenzo released Jenna's hand and leaned back, his expression shifting into something pleasant and normal, a mask he wore effortlessly. 2 breakfast specials, he told Dorothy. Scrambled eggs, bacon, toast. You got it, hon. When she left, Jenna leaned forward. What are you going to do? The Silva family hired mercenaries because they don't want direct confrontation. Not yet. They're testing me, probing for weakness before the peace summit. Lorenzo sipped his coffee. So I'm going to give them exactly what they want. I'm going to look weak, desperate, and defeated. How does that help? Because while they're congratulating themselves on cornering me, I'm going to dismantle their entire operation from the inside. Lorenzo's smile was sharp, predatory. By the time they realize what's happening, they'll have nothing left to negotiate with at the summit. And you and Lily will be so far removed from this mess that no one will ever think to look for you again. That's not possible. Jenna. Lorenzo's eyes were intense now, burning with purpose. I've spent my entire life in this world. I know how it works, how it thinks, how it bleeds. The Silva family made 3 mistakes this morning. They underestimated me. They hurt someone under my protection. And worst of all, he paused. They reminded me why Dante ran in the first place. Why men like your husband choose peace over power. His voice dropped. I can't leave this life, but I can make damn sure you and Lily never have to be part of it again. The breakthrough came 6 hours later. Lorenzo had moved them to a motel outside town, a forgettable place called The Pines with thin walls and thinner coffee. Jenna sat on the edge of the bed, her clothes still smelling like smoke and gun oil, while Lorenzo worked 3 phones simultaneously. His network was vast and terrifyingly efficient. Every call revealed another piece of the puzzle. Tommy Brescia from Chicago came through first. The mercenaries weren't just hired guns. They were a specialized unit out of Nevada, led by a man named Crane. Former military contractors who'd gone private, taking jobs for the highest bidder. The Silva family had paid them $200,000 upfront with another $300,000 due upon Lorenzo's confirmed death. $500,000 to kill me, Lorenzo said, almost amused. I should be flattered. You're insane, Jenna muttered. But Lorenzo was already making another call. This one in rapid Italian, his tone sharp and commanding. When he hung up, he looked satisfied. Crane's team uses a specific logistics company to move weapons across state lines. That company has, let's say, flexible loyalties. Lorenzo checked his watch. In 2 hours, Crane's supply cache will be seized by federal authorities based on an anonymous tip. No weapons means no contract completion. You can do that? Just make a call and have someone arrested. I can make a lot of things happen when motivated. Lorenzo's expression was grim. But that's just the first move. The Silva family needs to feel pressure, real pressure, before they'll back off completely. His phone buzzed. Marco calling. Talk to me, Lorenzo answered. We found something, Marco said. Silva's operation runs through 3 main revenue streams: a shipping company in Newark, a casino in Atlantic City, and a construction firm in Philadelphia. All legitimate fronts with dirty backs. But here's the interesting part. The construction company has a project manager who's been skimming money for the past 18 months. Lorenzo's eyes sharpened. How much? Nearly $2 million. He's been smart about it, hiding it in offshore accounts, fake invoices, ghost employees. But he got sloppy last month. Left a trail. Does Silva know? Not yet. We only found it because we've been digging deep all day. A slow smile spread across Lorenzo's face. Marco, you're a genius. Send me everything you have on this project manager. Everything. He hung up and turned to Jenna. The Silva family is about to have a very bad day. By nightfall, Lorenzo had set 5 different operations in motion. The mercenary team's weapons cache was seized. Crane was now scrambling to fulfill his contract without the tools to do so. The project manager skimming money from Silva's construction company received a mysterious email with evidence of his theft, along with a simple message: disappear now, or I send this to your boss. The man was on a plane to Costa Rica within 3 hours. Silva's shipping company in Newark received a surprise inspection from customs officials. Another anonymous tip about smuggling irregularities. They'd find nothing illegal, but the disruption would cost time and money. And most importantly, Lorenzo reached out to the other families attending the Peace Summit. I'm calling in favors, he explained to Jenna as he made the calls. The Bohr Ellis in Boston, the DeLuca Syndicate in Detroit, the Chong Organization in San Francisco. I'm letting them know that Silva tried to kill me before the summit using hired mercenaries. That he violated the truce we all agreed to. What does that do? It isolates them. In our world, reputation is everything. Silva wanted to eliminate me quietly and show up at the summit as the dominant power. Instead, he'll arrive as the family who broke faith and failed to deliver. Jenna watched him work with a strange mixture of horror and fascination. This was the world David had fled. A world of calculated moves and ruthless efficiency. Where phone calls could ruin lives and loyalty was a currency more valuable than gold. But she also saw something else. Lorenzo wasn't acting out of revenge or ego. Every move he made was designed to protect, to neutralize threats without unnecessary bloodshed. He was dismantling the Silva family's power structure like a surgeon removing a tumor, precise and purposeful. You're good at this, she said quietly. Lorenzo looked up from his phone. At what? Being what you are, she gestured vaguely. A leader. A strategist. David always said the people in his old life were monsters. But you're not a monster. You're just different. David was right to leave. Lorenzo set his phone down. This life takes pieces of you. Every decision, every compromise, every time you choose power over principles, it hollows you out. Your husband saw that early and had the courage to walk away. I respect him for it more than he probably ever knew. Then why do you stay? Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. Because someone has to. If I walk away, someone worse takes my place. Someone who wouldn't have let Dante go. Someone who wouldn't care about protecting you and Lily. He met her eyes. I stay because the alternative is worse. His phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from an unknown number. Mr. Rossi, this is Anthony Silva. I believe we need to talk. Lorenzo showed Jenna the screen. And there it is. The Silva family wants to negotiate. Is it a trap? Probably Lorenzo typed a response. But it means they're feeling the pressure. They're realizing they can't win this fight. Not without losing everything in the process. He hit send, then stood and stretched. Through the motel window, the sun was setting again. They'd been running for almost 24 hours straight. What now? Jenna asked. Now I meet with Silva. We establish terms. And then, Lorenzo paused, choosing his words carefully. Then I make sure you and Lily are taken care of before I leave. Taken care of how? You'll see. Lorenzo grabbed his jacket. Marco's outside. He'll stay with you while I'm gone. Don't open the door for anyone else. Lorenzo. Jenna stood, surprising herself by reaching out to touch his arm. Be careful. He looked at her hand on his sleeve, then at her face. Something passed between them, not romance but recognition. Two people who'd both loved the same man, now bound together by circumstances neither had chosen. I will, he promised. For Lily. For David's memory. And for you. Then he was gone, disappearing into the early evening darkness. Jenna sat back down on the bed, her mind spinning. 24 hours ago, her biggest problem had been a bank payment. Now she was sitting in a motel under Mafia protection, while the man connected to her dead husband's secret past went to negotiate with people who tried to kill them both. Her phone rang. Sarah's number. Jenna? Oh, thank God. Are you okay? Lily's been asking for you all day. Jenna's eyes filled with tears at the sound of her daughter's name. I'm fine. Is she safe? She's perfect. She thinks this is a big sleepover. She made cookies with me this afternoon. Can I talk to her? Of course. Hold on. A moment later, Lily's voice came through, bright and innocent and completely unaware of how close she'd come to danger. Mommy? When are you coming home? Jenna closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. Soon, baby. Very soon. I promise. The meeting with Anthony Silva took place in a neutral location. A private room in an upscale restaurant in Denver, chosen because it was public enough to prevent violence but private enough for honesty. Silva was a man in his 60s, gray hair slicked back, expensive suit, eyes that had seen too much and trusted too little. He sat across from Lorenzo with two bodyguards flanking him, though they looked more nervous than intimidating. You've made quite a mess of my operations, Rossi, Silva said, swirling whiskey in his glass. You tried to kill me with mercenaries, Lorenzo replied calmly. I'd say we're even. That was business. Nothing personal. You blew up a civilian's property. You threatened a 7-year-old child. Lorenzo's voice was ice. That became personal the moment you involved innocent people. Silva's jaw tightened. I've lost a project manager, had my shipping company shut down for 2 days, and now the other families think I violated the summit truce. You've cost me millions and my reputation. Then we understand each other. What do you want? Lorenzo leaned forward. 3 things. First, you call off any remaining contracts on my life. All of them. Immediately. Silva nodded slowly. Done. Second, you will never, and I mean never, go near Jenna Miller or her daughter again. You will forget they exist. If I hear even a whisper that someone connected to your family looked at them wrong, I will finish what I started and dismantle everything you've built. Understood. Third, Lorenzo pulled out a document and slid it across the table. You're going to help me make this right. Silva picked up the document, scanned it, and his eyebrows rose. A property transfer? You want me to buy the Miller airfield? At triple its market value. Cash payment, handled through a clean LLC with no traceable connection to either of our families. The money goes directly to Mrs. Miller as compensation for the damage your hired mercenaries caused. That's nearly $500,000. Consider it the cost of your mistakes. Lorenzo's expression was unreadable. You wanted to hurt me by destroying what she built. Now you're going to rebuild it better than before. Silva stared at him for a long moment, then laughed. A short, bitter sound. You know what's funny, Rossi? My intel said you were soft. That you'd inherited your father's empire but not his spine. They said you'd be easy to push around. And now I see why the other families respect you. Silva signed the document with a flourish. You don't fight like your father did, loud and bloody. You fight quiet, surgical. You hit where it hurts most and make it look like business. My father ruled through fear. I prefer to rule through leverage. Lorenzo took the signed document. But make no mistake, I can be just as brutal when necessary. You just never gave me cause to show it. Silva raised his glass. To the summit, then. May we both walk away with our empires intact. Lorenzo didn't toast. He simply stood, pocketed the document, and left. Dawn broke over the Pines Motel with soft golden light. Jenna hadn't slept. She'd spent the night on the phone with Sarah, listening to Lily's breathing while her daughter slept, occasionally talking to Sarah about everything and nothing. Sarah never asked questions. She was that kind of friend, the kind who helped first and pried later. When Lorenzo knocked at 6:47 a.m., Jenna jumped despite expecting him. He looked exhausted but satisfied. It's over. Over. Silva called off the mercenaries. Signed a contract promising to leave you alone. Lorenzo handed her the document. And something else. Jenna read the property transfer agreement, her eyes widening with each paragraph. This is more money than the airfield was ever worth. Lorenzo, I can't. You can, and you will. Lorenzo sat down across from her. Silva destroyed your livelihood trying to hurt me. This makes it right. With this money you can rebuild the hangar, buy new equipment, pay off every debt you have, and still have enough left over to secure Lily's future. But this came from them. From criminals. It came from someone who made a mistake and paid for it. Lorenzo's voice was gentle. Jenna, David spent his whole life trying to give you and Lily something clean, something safe. Don't refuse it because of where the money originated. Accept it because it means you'll never have to worry again. Tears streamed down Jenna's face. I don't know what to say. Say you'll use it wisely. Say you'll give Lily the life David wanted her to have. I will. I promise. Lorenzo stood. Marco's arranged a rental car for you. He'll drive you to Sarah's house to pick up Lily. I've also had a security team sweep your property. The fire department cleared it, and the structural damage is reparable. You can stay with Sarah until the rebuilding is done. Where will you be? Miami. The summit starts in 2 days. I need to be there. Lorenzo pulled out a business card and set it on the table. This is my personal number. If you ever need anything at all, you call me. Not as a client. As family. The word hung in the air between them. David would have wanted this, Jenna said quietly. You protecting us. Making sure we're okay. He was my brother in every way that mattered. Lorenzo's voice was thick with emotion. Protecting his family is the least I can do to honor his memory. Jenna stood and without thinking hugged him. Lorenzo stiffened for just a moment, then returned the embrace. It wasn't romantic, it was something deeper. The connection between two people who'd both loved Dante Russo, who'd both been changed by knowing him. When they pulled apart, Lorenzo was smiling. A real smile, not the cold mask he wore for the world. Teach Lily about airplanes, he said. The way David taught you. Keep his memory alive through her. I will. And Jenna. Lorenzo paused at the door. If she ever asks about her father's past, tell her the truth. Tell her he was brave enough to choose love over legacy. That's the best thing anyone can say about a man. Then he was gone. 3 weeks later, Jenna stood in front of her rebuilt hangar. The insurance company had initially refused the claim, but mysteriously, A consulting firm had intervened, smoothing everything over. She suspected Lorenzo's hand in that too. The new hangar was better than the old one: modern equipment, expanded workspace, even a small office with actual climate control. The sign above the door still read Miller's Aircraft Repair. But underneath in smaller letters she'd added, "In memory of David Miller, who taught me to fly." Lily ran across the tarmac, her small hand clutching a drawing she'd made. An airplane soaring above clouds. "Mommy, can we hang this in the new office?" Jenna scooped her daughter up, holding her close. "Absolutely, baby." In her pocket, Lorenzo's business card felt like a promise. A lifeline she hoped she'd never need to use, but was grateful to have nonetheless. The past couldn't be changed. David was gone. Lorenzo would always be part of a world she wanted no connection to. But somehow, through tragedy and violence and unexpected grace, she'd been given a second chance. A fresh start. The ability to rebuild not just her business but her life. And as she watched Lily run toward the hangar, laughing in the golden afternoon light, Jenna understood what David had known all along. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from power and choose the simple, beautiful act of protecting the people you love. David had done it for her. And Lorenzo had done it for them both. The jet repairs were finished. The debts were paid. The threats were neutralized. And for the first time in 18 months, Jenna Miller could finally breathe. "You're absolutely right. I apologize for the confusion. Looking back at the document you provided at the beginning, I can see you gave me a 12-section brief outline. I misread your instructions and thought you wanted me to condense it into 8 sections. Let me continue with Section 9 following your original 12-section structure." The message arrived at 4:37 a.m. Lorenzo sat in the motel room, his laptop open, 3 phones arranged in front of him like weapons. Marco stood by the window watching the parking lot. Vincent had returned an hour earlier. His ribs taped but his determination unshaken. The encrypted message was from Tommy Brescia in Chicago, and it contained everything Lorenzo needed. Names, locations, financial routes, and most importantly, leverage. "Got him," Lorenzo said, his voice carrying a satisfaction that made Marco turn around. "Silva's second in command. Better. Ricardo Vega. Silva's right hand for 15 years. The man who actually runs their operation while Silva plays golf and attends charity dinners." Lorenzo turned the laptop screen toward Marco. "And he's been very, very careless." The file was damning. Vega had been skimming money. Yes, but more than that, he'd been making side deals with the Bohr Ellis in Boston, positioning himself to take over the Silva family if Anthony Silva ever showed weakness. He'd cultivated relationships with 3 other families, built his own power base, and was essentially running a shadow operation within Silva's empire. A coup waiting to happen. "He's ambitious," Marco observed. "He's desperate," Lorenzo corrected, "which makes him useful." 2 hours later, Ricardo Vega received a phone call that would change everything. The abandoned industrial district on the outskirts of Denver was the kind of place where secrets went to die. Rusted machinery, broken windows, and the lingering smell of old oil and older crimes. Lorenzo arrived first, choosing his position carefully. An old foreman's office on the 2nd floor with clear sightlines and 2 exit routes. Marco and Vincent positioned themselves strategically, invisible but present. Vega arrived at 9:15 a.m. in a black Mercedes, accompanied by 2 bodyguards who looked competent but not exceptional. He was a man in his late 40s, sharp-featured, wearing an expensive suit that seemed out of place in the industrial wasteland. He climbed the metal stairs to the office, his bodyguards staying below as instructed. When he entered, Lorenzo was sitting behind an old desk, hands folded, expression neutral. "Mr. Rossi," Vega said, his accent thick with New Jersey origins, "this is unexpected. Sit." Vega hesitated, then sat across from Lorenzo. "Silva's very upset about the disruptions to his business. He sent me to negotiate. Silva didn't send you. You volunteered. Lorenzo slid a folder across the desk. Because you knew this meeting was about you, not him. Vega's face went pale as he opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, encrypted message transcripts, photographs of meetings with Borelli lieutenants, everything. Where did you get this? That's not the question you should be asking. Lorenzo leaned forward. The question is, what am I going to do with it? If you show this to Silva, you'll be dead by sunset. I know. Lorenzo's voice was matter of fact. Silva doesn't tolerate betrayal. He'd make an example of you, probably torture you first to send a message to anyone else thinking about disloyalty. Vega's hands trembled. What do you want? Information, cooperation, and then freedom. I don't understand. Lorenzo stood and walked to the window, looking out at the rusted landscape. Silva hired mercenaries to kill me. He involved innocent people, a single mother and her child, in his war. That's unacceptable. But I don't want to start a blood feud that'll cost both our families for years. He turned back to Vega. So instead, I'm going to cut the head off the snake without ever touching Silva directly. You're going to help me. Why would I do that? Because I'm offering you something Silva never will. A way out. Lorenzo returned to the desk. You give me everything I need: Silva's main operations, his financial networks, his connections to the other families, his leverage points. You help me dismantle his power structure from the inside. And in return you disappear. Clean identity, untraceable accounts, enough money to start over somewhere. Silva will never find you. Lorenzo's eyes were hard. You walk away from this life just like my friend Dante did 20 years ago. You get to live. Vega was silent for a long moment, processing. If I do this, Silva will know someone betrayed him. He'll suspect everyone. That's the beauty of it. Lorenzo smiled coldly. By the time he figures out it was you, you'll be on a beach in the Philippines under a name he'll never connect to Ricardo Vega. And if I refuse, then I give this folder to Silva and let nature take its course. Lorenzo shrugged. Either way, Silva's organization falls apart. The only question is whether you survive to see it. Vega stared at the folder, at the evidence of his own ambition and betrayal laid bare. Lorenzo could see the calculation happening behind his eyes, the weighing of loyalty against survival, power against peace. Finally, Vega spoke. What do you need to know? Lorenzo pulled out a recorder and set it on the desk. Everything. For the next 90 minutes, Ricardo Vega sang like a canary. He revealed Silva's main revenue streams. The shipping company was smuggling pharmaceuticals, the casino was laundering money for 3 different families, and the construction company was being used to dispose of evidence and occasionally bodies. He provided names of corrupt officials on Silva's payroll: 2 judges, a police captain, and a state senator. He gave up locations of safe houses, weapons caches, and emergency escape routes. He explained Silva's relationships with the other families, who owed him favors, who hated him, who was waiting for him to show weakness so they could move against him. By the time Vega finished, Lorenzo had enough information to dismantle the Silva family's entire operation without firing a single shot. One more thing, Lorenzo said as Vega prepared to leave. The mercenaries Silva hired, Crane's team, where are they now? Pulled back after the weapons seizure. They're in a motel off Highway 70, waiting for Silva to either pay them the rest or release them from the contract. Silva going to pay them? Vega shook his head. He's furious they failed. He'll probably cut them loose, maybe even send people to eliminate them so they can't talk about who hired them. Lorenzo nodded slowly. Then I'll give them a better offer. You're going to hire the mercenaries who tried to kill you. I'm going to give them a reason to testify against Silva if necessary. Lorenzo stood and extended his hand. You have 48 hours to disappear. After that, all of this becomes public, and Silva will be hunting for whoever leaked it. Be gone. Vega shook his hand, his grip uncertain. Why are you doing this? Really? Lorenzo thought of David Miller, Dante Russo, working on airplanes in the middle of nowhere, building a life with Jenna, raising Lily far from the violence and darkness. Because someone I loved showed me there's another way, Lorenzo said quietly. And I owe it to his memory to let others find that way too. Vega left without another word. Marco emerged from his position. You think he'll actually disappear? He's smart enough to know it's his only option. Lorenzo collected the recorder. Now we move to the next phase. Contact the families attending the summit. It's time they learned exactly who they're dealing with. The lake was 15 miles outside town, hidden among pine trees and accessible only by a narrow dirt road. It was the kind of place that existed outside of time. Still water reflecting endless sky, the sound of wind through branches, nothing but peace. Jenna sat on a weathered dock, her feet dangling above the water. She'd been there for an hour, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 72 hours. Her entire life had been turned inside out, shaken violently, and set back down in a configuration she didn't recognize. She heard footsteps on the dock behind her but didn't turn around. She knew it was Lorenzo. How did you find me? She asked. Marco followed you. From a distance, Lorenzo sat down beside her, keeping a respectful space between them. He wanted to make sure you were safe. I needed to think. I understand. They sat in silence for several minutes. A bird called from across the lake. The water rippled gently. Sarah called me this morning, Jenna said finally. Lily asked why she couldn't come home yet. Asked if something was wrong. I had to lie to my 7-year-old daughter and tell her everything was fine. It will be fine. Soon. Will it? Jenna turned to face him, her eyes red from crying. You can dismantle Silva's organization, you can make deals and move pieces around like chess, but my daughter will always remember this. She'll remember the week mommy sent her away. When something scary happened that no one would explain. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. I know. And I'm sorry. David used to have nightmares, Jenna continued, her voice breaking. He'd wake up gasping, covered in sweat, and when I asked what he dreamed about, he'd never tell me. But I knew. He was dreaming about his past. About the life he left behind, the violence he witnessed, the things he'd done or seen done. She wiped her eyes roughly. He was terrified that life would find him. Find us. And in the end he was right. It just took 20 years and came in the form of his best friend's private jet. Dante was afraid of a lot of things, Lorenzo said quietly. But he was never afraid of living. He chose you, chose Lily, chose a life of purpose over a life of power. That took more courage than anything I've ever done. He loved you, you know. Jenna's voice was softer now. He never said your name, never talked about his past directly. But sometimes he'd get this look in his eyes, sad and distant, and he'd say things like, I had a brother once, or I left someone behind who deserved better. Lorenzo's breath caught. He said that. Many times. Especially near the end, when the cancer was taking everything from him. Jenna's tears flowed freely now. He made me promise something. Made me swear on Lily's life. What? He said if his past ever caught up with us, if dangerous men ever came looking, I should tell them that Dante Russo died with honor. That he never betrayed anyone, never spoke about the family, never broke the code. Her voice shook. He said if I told them that, maybe they'd leave us alone. Lorenzo felt something crack inside his chest. He was protecting you. Even dying, he was trying to shield you from consequences that should never have been yours. He was protecting you too, Jenna said, meeting Lorenzo's eyes. He knew that if he betrayed family secrets, it would fall on you to clean up the mess. He didn't want that. He wanted you to be free of him. I was never free of him. Lorenzo's voice was raw now, stripped of the cold control he usually maintained. Every decision I made, every time I chose strategy over brutality, every time I let someone walk away instead of making an example, it was because of Dante. Because he showed me there was another way to be strong. He stood abruptly, walking to the edge of the dock, his back to Jenna. When he left, my father wanted to hunt him down. wanted to make him an example to anyone else thinking about abandoning the family. I was 12 years old, and I stood in my father's office and told him that if he touched Dante, I'd never forgive him. Never. Lorenzo's hands clenched into fists. My father hit me for that. Broke 2 of my ribs. But he let Dante go. And 20 years later, when my father was murdered and I took over, everyone expected me to be just like him, ruthless, brutal, feared. But I couldn't, because I kept thinking, what would Dante do? How would my brother handle this? Jenna stood and walked to him. Lorenzo, look at me. He turned slowly. His eyes were wet. David, Dante, he made his choice, Jenna said firmly. He chose to leave to build a different life, to raise a daughter who would never know the darkness he came from. That was his decision, and he never regretted it. But he also never stopped caring about you. He just knew that love sometimes means letting go. I should have found him, Lorenzo whispered. Should have checked on him, made sure he was okay, that his life was everything he'd hoped for. He was happy, Jenna interrupted, placing her hand on Lorenzo's arm. He was so happy. He had work he loved, a daughter who adored him, and me. He used to say he'd found paradise in the most ordinary life imaginable. Lorenzo's composure finally shattered. He turned away, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. 20 years of grief and loss and the weight of a life he'd never chosen finally breaking through. Jenna did something she never thought she'd do. She wrapped her arms around this dangerous man, this mafia heir who'd brought chaos into her world, and held him while he cried for the brother he'd lost twice, once to freedom, once to death. He always feared his past would come back to hurt you, Lorenzo finally said, his voice muffled. That's the real reason he had nightmares. Not because he regretted leaving, but because he was terrified that men like me would find you and Lily and use you to get to him. But you didn't. No, Lorenzo pulled back, wiping his eyes. Because he wasn't just my brother. He was my conscience. And his daughter, your daughter. She's proof that someone from our world can create something pure and good. He looked at Jenna directly, his expression fierce despite the tears. No harm will ever reach her again, Jenna. Not while I breathe. Not from Silva, not from anyone in my world. Not from any threat that exists. I swear it on Dante's memory, on everything he sacrificed to build the life you shared. Jenna believed him. Not because of his power or his resources, but because she saw the truth in his eyes, the same fierce protectiveness David had shown, the same willingness to sacrifice everything for the people he loved. Thank you, she said quietly, for letting him go all those years ago, for protecting us now, for being the kind of man who still has a conscience. Lorenzo managed a sad smile. Dante gave me that. It's the least I can do to honor it. They stood together on that dock as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the water, 2 people bound by love for a man who'd chosen peace over power, connected by grief and responsibility and the strange recognition that sometimes the most dangerous people can also be the most protective. And for the first time since David's death, Jenna felt like someone truly understood the weight of what she'd lost, and what she still had to protect. The sun hadn't yet broken the horizon when Jenna arrived at the airfield. The reconstruction crew had worked through the night, Lorenzo's people, efficient and silent, rebuilding what the explosion had destroyed. The hangar stood repaired, the damaged sections replaced with new steel and concrete. Inside, under portable floodlights, sat not the destroyed Gulfstream, but a different aircraft entirely. A brand new Citation X, gleaming white with silver accents. Jenna stopped in her tracks. What is this? Lorenzo emerged from the hangar, looking tired but satisfied. He'd been awake for 36 hours straight, coordinating operations across 3 states, while simultaneously arranging the impossible. Your jet exploded, he said simply. So I acquired another one. In 3 days. Money and urgency work wonders. Lorenzo gestured toward the aircraft. It's similar enough to the Gulfstream that the adaptations I need are minimal. And more importantly, it's ready to fly. Jenna walked slowly around the citation, her mechanics eye cataloging every detail. It was immaculate, fresh off the factory floor, maybe 200 flight hours total. The kind of aircraft that cost $8 million minimum. You just bought a jet. Leased technically. With an option to purchase. Lorenzo checked his watch. But that's not why I called you here. Come inside. He led her to her rebuilt office. The space was transformed, new desk, new computer, new everything. But on the wall, carefully preserved and reframed, were her original photos. David in his Air Force uniform, Jenna receiving her commendation, and in the center the photo of David and Jenna beside the Cessna. But there was something new beside it. A second photograph, old and slightly faded, two boys, maybe 12 years old, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera. One was clearly a young Lorenzo. The other had David's eyes. Dante and me, Lorenzo said quietly. Summer 1995. Before everything got complicated. Jenna touched the frame gently. Where did you find this? I've kept it all these years. In my office in New York, hidden away. Lorenzo stood beside her. I want you to have it. So Lily can know that her father had a brother who loved him. So she can understand where she comes from. Even the parts David never talked about. Jenna's eyes filled with tears. Lorenzo. There's more. He pulled out his phone and showed her a screen. Bank transfer confirmations. Construction contracts. Legal documents. The airfield is completely rebuilt. All debts cleared. 6 months of operating capital in your business account. And something else. He pulled out a folder, thicker this time, official looking. Full custody documentation. Legally reinforced. If anyone ever questions your ability to provide for Lily, you have proof of financial stability, property ownership, and business success. No court will ever take her from you. Jenna couldn't speak. Her hands trembled as she took the folder. How did you? I told you. No harm will reach her. That includes bureaucratic harm, financial harm, any kind of threat to her future. Lorenzo's expression softened. David would have done the same for someone I loved. This is just me repaying a 20-year-old debt. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten, deep blue fading to purple, the first hints of dawn touching the clouds. Lorenzo's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression changed, became harder, more focused. It's done, he said. What's done? Everything. Lorenzo pocketed the phone. In the last 6 hours, the following events occurred. Silva's shipping operation in Newark was raided by federal authorities. They found evidence of pharmaceutical smuggling, money laundering, and ties to 3 other criminal organizations. Silva's casino in Atlantic City had its gaming license suspended pending investigation into financial irregularities. His construction company lost its 3 biggest contracts when word leaked about the project manager, who fled to Costa Rica with $2 million. Jenna stared at him. You did all that. I coordinated it. Other people executed. Lorenzo walked to the window, watching the sunrise. Ricardo Vega's testimony, recorded and documented, was delivered to 4 different law enforcement agencies. The other families attending the summit received detailed briefings on Silva's attempted murder of a rival family head before the peace talks. Silva's reputation is destroyed. His organization is in shambles. His power base is gone. What happens to him? He'll survive. Probably retire, claim health issues, fade into obscurity. Lorenzo turned back to her. But he'll never threaten anyone again. The Silva family as a power structure no longer exists. By this afternoon, it'll be absorbed by other families or dismantled entirely. And you? I go to Miami. Attend the summit as planned. Negotiate new territories, new agreements, new peace. Lorenzo's smile was cold. And I do it from a position of strength, having proven that I can dismantle an entire organization in 72 hours without firing more than a handful of shots. Jenna shook her head in disbelief. You're terrifying. I'm effective. Lorenzo moved toward the door, then paused. The citation needs a final systems check before I leave. I was hoping you could do it. One last job properly paid before we say goodbye. You're leaving today. As soon as you clear the aircraft, Lorenzo met her eyes. The faster I'm gone, the safer you and Lily are. No one in my world will connect you to me once enough time passes. You'll just be the mechanic who fixed a jet during an emergency landing. Jenna wanted to argue, to say something profound, but the truth was simpler than that. Lorenzo Rossi was dangerous, connected to a world she wanted nothing to do with, and his presence put her daughter at risk. But he was also David's brother. The man who'd protected them when he had no obligation to. The man who'd honored her husband's memory by ensuring his family would never suffer. I'll check the citation, she said. Give me 2 hours. Jenna worked with focused precision, checking every system, every connection, every potential failure point. The citation was perfect. No flaws, no concerns, ready to fly. At 8:47 a.m., she signed off on the inspection report. Lorenzo stood by the aircraft, dressed in a fresh suit, looking every inch the powerful heir he was. Marco and Vincent were already on board, preparing for departure. She's ready, Jenna said, handing him the report. Safest aircraft I've ever inspected. Thank you. Lorenzo took the report, then pulled out an envelope. Your payment. Plus a bonus for the accelerated timeline. Jenna opened it. Inside was a check for $80,000. Lorenzo, this is too much. It's exactly right, he smiled. You're the best mechanic within 60 miles, remember? You set the price. She laughed despite herself. I'm going to miss you. Is that crazy? No crazier than me missing you. Lorenzo extended his hand. Take care of Lily. Teach her everything David taught you. Let her grow up free of all of this. Jenna shook his hand, then surprised them both by pulling him into a brief hug. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. For letting David go. For protecting us. For being his brother when it mattered most. Lorenzo held her for just a moment. If you ever need anything. I know. I call. He pulled back, nodded once and walked toward the citation. Jenna watched as the jet taxied to the runway, engines building to a roar. She watched as it lifted into the morning sky, climbing steadily, becoming smaller and smaller until it was just a glint of silver against the blue. And then it was gone. Jenna stood alone on the tarmac, the envelope in her hand, the sunrise warm on her face. Her phone buzzed. Sarah. Lily's awake and asking for you. How soon can you get here? Jenna smiled through her tears and typed back. On my way. Tell her mommy's coming home. The Citation X climbed to cruising altitude, leaving Colorado behind in a patchwork of green and brown far below. Lorenzo sat in the leather seat, watching the landscape disappear, feeling the weight of 3 days settle into his bones. Marco emerged from the cockpit. We're on course for Miami. ETA 4 hours. Good. Lorenzo didn't look away from the window. Any word from the summit? The other families are already positioning themselves to absorb Silva's territories. The Borealis want Newark. DeLucas claiming Philadelphia. Chang staying neutral but offering to mediate. Marco sat across from him. You're walking into that summit as the man who took down a rival family without starting a war. They're going to either fear you or try to eliminate you. Let them try. Lorenzo finally turned from the window. What's the status on Ricardo Vega? Disappeared completely. Last confirmed sighting was at LAX, boarding a flight to Manila. After that, nothing. Marco's expression was approving. He followed your instructions perfectly. He wanted to live more than he wanted power. Smart man. Lorenzo pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages. Updates from his people in New York, confirmation of real estate transfers, legal documents filed. Everything moving like clockwork. One message stood out. From an unknown number. The airfield looks beautiful. Thank you for giving us back our home. J. Lorenzo stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. It was always yours. I just made sure it stayed that way. He hesitated, then added. Dante would be proud of the woman you've become, the mother you are. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. He hit send and put the phone away. Boss, Vincent called from the back of the cabin. News alert. You need to see this. Lorenzo moved to where Vincent had a tablet open. The headline read, Massive organized crime bust in Newark Silva family operations exposed. The article detailed federal raids, arrests, seized assets. Anthony Silva himself was pictured being led from his estate in handcuffs, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. The reporter speculated about internal betrayal, about rival families orchestrating the takedown, about the end of an era. They had no idea how right they were. That's going to send shockwaves through the summit, Marco observed. That's the point. Lorenzo closed the tablet. Silva tried to kill me before I could arrive at the negotiating table. Instead, he's not arriving at all. The other families will understand the message, which is that I don't fight the way they expect. I don't meet force with force. I dismantle from within. I turn allies into liabilities, and I remove threats without ever raising my voice. Lorenzo's expression was cold. And that anyone who threatens innocent people to get to me will discover there are worse things than death. Like watching everything you built crumble while you're powerless to stop it. Marco nodded slowly. Your father would have just killed Silva. My father's methods got him murdered in his own home. Lorenzo stood, straightening his suit. I choose a different path. Dante showed me that strength isn't about who can hit hardest. It's about who can build something that lasts. 15 miles outside town, Jenna pulled up to Sarah Chin's house. Before she could even turn off the engine, the front door burst open and Lily came running out, her small legs pumping, her face lit with pure joy. Mommy! Jenna barely had time to get out of the truck before her daughter launched herself into her arms. She caught Lily holding her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling the solid reality of her child safe and whole. I missed you so much, baby. I missed you too. Lily pulled back, her eyes wide. Sarah said you had to work on a really important plane. Did you fix it? I did. All fixed. Was it amazing? Jenna thought about the Gulfstream that exploded, the citation that replaced it, the man who'd brought both chaos and salvation into her life. She thought about Lorenzo Rossi, flying toward Miami and a world she'd never understand, carrying her husband's memory with him. It was complicated, Jenna said honestly. But yes, it was kind of amazing. Sarah appeared on the porch smiling. Everything okay? Everything's perfect. Jenna set Lily down but kept holding her hand. Thank you, Sarah, for everything. I can't tell you how much it meant. That's what friends do. Sarah's expression turned more serious. Those men in the car left yesterday afternoon. Haven't seen them since. Whatever was happening. It's over, Jenna said firmly. Completely over. And she believed it. Lorenzo had made sure of it. Back at the airfield, Jenna walked Lily through the rebuilt hangar, watching her daughter's eyes grow wide at the new equipment, the fresh paint, the sense of possibility. It's like a whole new place. Lily spun in a circle. Can we put my drawings up in the office? Absolutely. Jenna unlocked the office door, and Lily immediately ran to the wall of photographs. She stopped in front of the new picture, the two boys with their arms around each other. Mommy, who's this? Jenna crouched beside her daughter. That's your daddy when he was young. And that's his best friend Lorenzo. Daddy had a best friend. He did. They grew up together like brothers. Jenna chose her words carefully. They went different directions when they grew up, but they never stopped caring about each other. Lily studied the photo with the seriousness only a 7-year-old could manage. Daddy looks happy. He was happy. He had people who loved him just like you do. Do you think his friend Lorenzo still thinks about him? Jenna felt tears prick her eyes. I know he does, sweetheart. Every single day. Lily seemed satisfied with that answer. She moved to the desk, already pulling out crayons to make new drawings for the rebuilt office. Jenna stood alone for a moment, looking at the photographs on the wall. the past and present intertwined. David's two lives finally connected in a way they never had been while he was alive. Her phone buzzed. Lorenzo's response to her message. Dante would be proud of the woman you've become. The mother you are. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Jenna smiled through her tears and typed back one final message. Thank you for letting him go all those years ago. Thank you for bringing him back to us, even if only for a moment. Fly safe, Lorenzo. And if you ever need a mechanic. She hesitated, then finished. You know where to find family. She hit send and pocketed the phone. Outside, the morning had fully arrived, bright and clear and full of promise. The airfield was whole again. Her debts were paid. Her daughter was safe. The future stretched out before them, clean and unencumbered by the past. Jenna watched Lily drawing at the desk, humming to herself, completely at peace. This was what David had died protecting. This ordinary, beautiful moment. A child creating art in her mother's office, unaware of the darkness that had briefly touched their lives and been driven away by a man who understood the value of innocence. Mommy. Lily looked up. Can we go flying this weekend? In the little plane. The Cessna. Jenna smiled. Absolutely. Would you like that? Yes. And maybe I can try steering like Daddy used to let me. Maybe. If you're very careful and follow all the rules. Lily grinned and went back to her drawing. Jenna stood in the doorway of her rebuilt office, in her rebuilt hangar, looking at her rebuilt life, and felt something she hadn't felt in the 18 months since David's death. Hope. Real genuine hope that everything would be okay. That she could build a future for her daughter. That the past, both David's and Lorenzo's, could finally rest in peace. And somewhere in the sky between Colorado and Florida, Lorenzo Rossi looked out at the clouds and allowed himself the smallest smile. Dante Russo's family was safe. The debt was paid. The promise was kept. And for a man who lived in a world of violence and betrayal, that was the closest thing to redemption he'd ever know. 6 months later, Lorenzo received a package at his New York office. Inside was a child's drawing. A plane soaring through clouds, the sun bright in the corner, stick figures on the ground waving. At the bottom, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, "Thank you for helping my mommy. Love, Lily." Behind the drawing was a photo. Jenna and Lily standing beside the Cessna, both wearing matching pilot jackets, both grinning at the camera. On the back, in Jenna's handwriting, her first solo lesson. She's a natural just like her father. The past is at peace. The future is bright. Thank you for making that possible. Lorenzo pinned both the drawing and the photo to his office wall, beside the faded picture of two boys who'd once been brothers. Some debts could never be fully repaid. But some promises could be kept. And in the end, that was enough. The end.